My name is Ken Allen. Today, February 20th, 1989, I'm speaking with Dave Latimer. Dave Latimer has been a leader and teacher of boys and young men for 2 generations. He's an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a loyal Cub Scout and Boy Scout leader in the Palo Alto 2nd Ward of the church. Today is an opportunity to learn more about Dave and his life.
I greatly appreciate this opportunity, and maybe this will be a legacy or a heritage TV film for my grandkids. You have a lot of questions here that have a lot of depth to them that really would be a beautiful picture of a person's life. But you asked me to start out right from the beginning and where I was born and raised. Well, on November 4th, 1918, I was born in Salt Lake City, Utah. My father, David Archie Latimer Sr., and my mother, Ethel May West. We lived at 1502 South 3rd East, right there at that time was pretty much in the middle of Salt Lake City. Now Salt Lake City has grown well past that, clear out to the mountains. Well, you ask about growing up and about the Depression. Was I aware of it? Not too much. We were having too much fun. There were times that the Depression kind of showed up when the shredded wheat cardboard separators that we put in our shoes wore through, clear through the hole in the shoe sole, and our feet were scraping on the ground. Then it was kind of obvious that it was in a depressed area. But we would half sole them ourselves. I can remember putting on some rubber half soles and gluing them on, and they worked pretty good. I was quite amazed. Sometimes they would pretty well wear thin, or the glue would come unglued and we would flop along with these things. Another instance that I became aware that it was kind of a depressed time was that there was a jacket with a helmet with goggles. And boy, that looked like something that I really wanted. And when I asked for it, they says, sorry, we have no money. But we had a lot of fun. As growing up, we took advantage of kick-the-can games, run sheepy run, and we had our share of toys like sleighs and skates. And one toy that I really enjoyed was the kangaroo jumpers. That was kind of novel. They were a set of springs that were about 1 foot high, and you'd really jump along like a kangaroo, holding them up with straps to your feet. It was fun. But I guess the most fun for me, and making me aware that life had fun, was my trees in my backyard. I had 2 apple trees that every boy in the world should have in his backyard. They were magnificent. In fact, one of them was so big that some 10 boys could be in the top branches around this tree circumference all at the same time, and they'd all be pretty close to 20 feet in the air. It was a magnificent tree. An apple tree is strong. So is a great climbing tree. The other tree was not so huge, but it was limber, and it had a couple of limbs that you'd be 20 feet in the air, and pretty soon you'd jump on it, and it would take you clear to the ground in just one big full swoop. And so, this was my toy. And it was a great one. And we played slips in it, then we played Tarzan. And we had lots of time in it and building tree houses and enjoying ourselves. And it was good physical therapy, physical development. It helped me be a good chinner. In fact, you know these horizontal ladders in the gyms this was at Lincoln High School, South High School in Salt Lake City, 2 sets of horizontal ladders. And well, they must have been, what, 15 feet each, so that across it was a good 30 feet from one end to the other. And our physical fitness instructor had us do some swinging along these horizontal bars. And it turned out that because of my tree, I was able to break the record very quick and do 30 times back and forth in no time at all. And my instructor didn't believe me. And that really hurt. Here I was, a monkey in the trees, and he wouldn't believe me that I could do that. It was so easy for me. Well, there was a boy in our scout troop who was really good at everything athletic. Running, jumping, swimming. He always came in first in all the contests in our troop. But he didn't live near me, so he was not acquainted with my tree. And so I was kind of gloating a little bit, and I invited him over, and just for the afternoon to play. And we got in a game of slips, and I could catch him easy, but he couldn't catch me. But I was saving a special leap that I had practiced. For 1 full week, I had put a pipe across the center of this apple tree to enable me to get close enough to a limb to jump to it, and from there to a second limb, to a third limb, and right on down, a perfect Tarzan route. I would get on the pipe and make the jump, then get to the ground, come back up, move back on the pipe a couple of feet, make the jump, come back. Taking it in graduations like that, it finally, about after a week's time, I had guts enough to take the pipe away and jump the whole distance, clear across this chasm in the middle of the apple tree, to the limb, on down, and just hit these limbs just enough to slow it down so that you didn't crash to the ground. A perfect Tarzan route. While in this game with this young man, I was leading him up to this, and got him coming and chasing me, and got him fairly close to me when I made this leap, this ultimate leap. Made the leap, hit the limbs on the way down, turned around and looked, and was gloating up like that. And here he comes. I couldn't believe it. He made that leap, never have been in the tree before. He made that leap and got down to the ground right next to me, and I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe it. I let him catch me. From then on, I learned that the Lord has given different talents to different people, and we should encourage these different talents and not try to gloat over them. Well, that was one good lesson.
Dave, who had the greatest influence on your life?
Well, let's see. Of course, my family. My father and my mother and my sisters. My father, I think that he tried to live the gospel of our Savior Jesus Christ as much as anybody. And I think he did a good job. And my mother was very creative and exceptional talent. And I think my 2 sisters taught me a little bit about how to treat a girl. But outside of my family, I think that I would say it was Grant Graff. Grant Graff was my scoutmaster, and he did a good job. He did an exceptional job. We did a lot of things together.
When did you first meet him?
You gotta talk louder for me, Ken.
When did you first meet him?
When Grant Graff? Well, let's see. I'm not sure, other than just being the scoutmaster himself, that he came in as scoutmaster. I think that's when I first met him, but I can remember at one time, he smoked a pipe. I can remember him at the schoolyards on his side of the fence at his home, and we were playing ball on the other side, and we saw him over there at the fence, and we went over to him, and he was smoking his pipe. And he said to us, "Boys, how about helping me quit smoking this pipe?" And we said, "Sure." And that was an outstanding moment, and I think we accomplished it. But he, as a leader, was a very friendly man. He worked in the post office, and 1 week out of every year of his vacation, he took us scouts someplace or did something. We built snowshoes, we built skis, bows and arrows and targets, and we went hiking into the Wasatch Mountains there. We went to southern Utah. Marvelous activity for us guys. However, one thing that really changed my life was one moment when, well, the troop was going on a 50-miler to climb Kings Peak in Utah, the highest peak in Utah. And me, a 14-year-older, that sounded pretty overwhelming. So I decided that I didn't want to go. Well, my scoutmaster Grant Graff came over to my house, and we talked on the front lawn. I can remember the two of us sitting together on the front lawn, and I can't remember what we talked about, except when he left, he says, I agreed that I would go on the 50. And boy, am I glad I did. It was one of the high experiences of my young life. I was one of the timid ones, kind of. Even at the base of Kings Peak. This was a stake function, and there must have been 50 of us in this 50-miler hike on a stake basis. But us guys in our own troop, we decided, we didn't want to climb up that Kings Peak. We were right camped at the base of it. So the rest of the stake went up, climbed the peak, came back with glowing reports about what a tremendous experience it was. So we all look at our scoutmaster and we say, "Hey, Brother Grant, can we climb it?" And he says, "Sure, we'll climb it tomorrow and then catch up with the rest of them down the trail." So we did. We climbed Kings Peak. Us timid ones who stayed behind, about 6 of us. We were all at the top, and I can remember distinctly holding my fingers up like this, the static electricity buzzing between them, and we said, let's get out of here. And Kings Peak is just a mass of boulders, about the size of garages or houses or bathrooms, big boulders, and we jumped boulder to boulder, tore down that mountain to get away from that electricity. We didn't know what was going to strike us. But it was a wonderful experience. And then the next night, there was a sheep herder who barbecued in the pit, a lamb overnight for us. This is about 5 days out, and that's a long time to be without a hamburger. But he cooked this, but on a whole steak of kids, he only got one little teeny bite. But I can distinctly remember that most delicious bite that I had ever tasted in my life. It was all a wonderful experience. The trip was great. We talked about it on radio. Our troop got on and talked about our activity of climbing Kings Peak. But it was things like that my scoutmaster did for me impressed me greatly. But that one moment where he sat on the lawn with me and convinced me, oh, I could do it. He convinced me that I could do it. We could go on this 50-miler. So, for me, Grant Graff was an encourager. And in fact, I have followed that philosophy in all of my scouting activity. I wanted to be an encourager just like my scoutmaster was to me. In fact, I would like that on my tombstone. He was an encourager just like his scoutmaster was. Well, that was a turning moment in my life. That one thing that he did for me. And it's been the basis for my philosophy and my scouting career.
Dave, what would you do differently now that you've lived so much of your life?
Well, let's see. First of all, I think that I would practice what I am now preaching. I definitely could have been a better son. I could have been more thoughtful. I could have written more letters and say thank you, Mom, because she was a great mom. I think that is one of the main things that I would change. Also, I would hope that I would take better advantage of education. It just seems to me that there's a lot of talented people who are very willing to share their talents. And that's what I love about the Boy Scout program. The counseling, the merit badges, where the young man can find something new in his life, learn something new, and at the same time learn a new friend and obtain a new friend through the counselor. And that's one of the things that I'm preaching now is for these young men to pick the brains of everybody they can. Everybody knows something at the same time. That's common knowledge. But everybody has his own individual talents. And if you could pick their brains and find out what those individual interests, hobbies, talents are, and possibly, hopefully, incorporate them into your own life. Of course, the guiding principle in all of this is the gospel of our Savior, Jesus Christ. And I think now that I have that knowledge more, I would have emphasized it more in my own life. Well, I was like Joseph Smith. I didn't do anything really sinful. It's just that, well, I didn't take advantage of my advantages when I should have.
What are your life's goals now?
Now, all right. Well, I want to disseminate as much as I can the essence of my life's philosophy, which is written in an open letter to young men. And if, with your permission, I would really like to read that, just as a basis for what I think is the first steps in putting into your everyday life the gospel of our Savior Jesus Christ. So, here is my life's essence. An open letter to a young man. From David A. Latimer Jr. And this was written May 5th, 1988 in Palo, Alto, California. Dear young man, if you plan to be a great husband and a great father, then start early. Start with your mom. No two people are exactly alike, so there has to be good communications between the two people to know exactly what it is they say and mean. This is Latimer's basic philosophy. I've never seen it in print anyplace, but I truly believe it. One of life's greatest evils is misunderstanding, because it happens so often, practically constantly. Misunderstanding. It is so easy to have one thing in mind and have it received way, way, way out of what was intended. In fact, here is a perfect example, I think. I got up early one morning, and it was kind of chilly, and so I lighted the gas fireplace and put some wood on, and when my wife got up, the chill had left the room, and she commented how nice it is to get up to a cheery fire. Aha, I said to myself, I'll get up early and start the fire and get the nice room and be romantic. And I did. But about 2 weeks later, I overheard my wife say to a friend, I'm afraid that Dave gets chilly pretty easy from all that weight he has lost from the cancer, because he gets up and lights the fire every morning. So she was concerned about me and my health and my well-being. And here I was trying to be romantic. Little things like that constantly are misunderstandings that we got to be careful of. Well, anyway, learn from your mom and dad, because they've been where you are. Learn what makes them tick. Learn what their beliefs, hopes, and desires are. Learn what their fantasies are and were at your age. Here's an example. When I was a sub-teen, I often thought about being a movie Tarzan. And I've told you about the tree in my backyard and how I was practicing being a movie Tarzan, and how I learned my lesson about not to gloat over my talent, and that the Lord has given each one of us different talents, and we should respect that. So I've told you that story. But at age 16, like all the heroes in Edgar Rice Burroughs' books on Tarzan and Mars stories, I fantasized rescuing damsels in distress. I rescued more damsels away from charging elephants and roaring lions than you could shake a stick at. And all the damsels thanked me. That was one of my fantasies. Normally, but there are some oddball parents in this world who are not taught right. A parent wants you to be happy, learn lots of things, have a good education, have a good job that you enjoy doing, earn a good living, and in your turn, have a great marriage and be a great father. Here are ways to learn to do that. Learn that your mom has needs. She needs and wants to be loved. She needs and wants to be appreciated. She needs and wants to be needed. Learn that she is just like you. You want to be loved and appreciated. You want to be of some value to others. You want to be a hero in some way, like knock in the winning home run, or sink in the winning basket, or make the clinching speech in a debate team, or standing ovation for your trumpet solo, standing ovation for your stand-up comic routine, or take a winner in a photo contest. That's always been my desire, to take a winning photo picture. Learn to be a good listener. Don't think that you know it all, because the more a man knows, the more he realizes how little he knows. Say he learns everything in a book, and pretty soon he looks up on the shelf and there's 10 more books, and he learns everything there, and pretty soon he sees 1,000 books. So you'll never learn everything there is to know. But work at it. Repeat back what you think you've heard just to make sure that you don't misunderstand. Here's an example. Let's see if I've got this straight, Mom. You want me to buy 10 stamps at the pharmacy, mail these 3 letters, shop at the grocery store for whole wheat bread, 2 bunches of carrots, 6 ears of corn. Did I get that right, Mom? Perfect, son. But it would be good practice to repeat back what you think you've heard, just to make sure that you don't misunderstand. This will help you become a better listener. When listening, look the person in the eye who is talking and use body language that shows you are listening. Like nod your head yes, yes, or no, no, if that's appropriate. Encourage them to finish before you butt in. Let other people be angry and let off steam. But don't you, that's not Christ-like. Just realize where they are in their learning towards being Christ-like. Now there's all that, the story of how he cleansed the temple, but remember, when Christ cleansed the temple, he did not dump over the doves. He had them take them out. Be able to express your feelings. This is important. As a baby, we would cry to get what we wanted. And as we got older, we would cry less, but we failed to learn a good substitute for crying, to express our needs. We tend to hold it inside of ourselves, silently, and maybe even resentfully, just because we just do not know how to express our feelings. Feelings are often more important than facts, but hopefully the facts and the truth will emerge. So, learn to express your needs, because nobody can read your mind. Share your accomplishments at school and on the playing field and in Scouts and wherever. Share. Life isn't worth much if you can't share. Even the hermit shares with his dog and his wildlife friends. Express your wants, but realize that even your mom and dad don't get everything that they want. Even the abundantly rich have things missing in their lives. Ask questions. Even if you think it's a dumb question, just remember that if someone thinks it's a dumb question, even he didn't know the answer at one time in his life. Learn to supply your mom's needs. Give her a hug every day, because she needs it. Express appreciation for what she does for you. Does she taxi you, cook for you, help you with your homework? Does she read the scriptures with you to learn how Christ wants you to be a great person? Lighten her load. Bust your own dishes. Take your turn at doing the dishes. Vacuum. Bike to the store. Babysit and teach your siblings. Here is your chance to practice being the greatest teacher in the world. My job on Saturdays is to vacuum and clean the bathroom. I'm hoping that I'm helping to lighten the load of my wife. At age 16, I worked in Opie Skaggs Bakery in Salt Lake City, and the toilet was not a tidy sight. I could not stand it, so I took it upon myself to tidy it up. And when my boss saw it, how nice and clean, his comment was, "Well, Dave, I see you're not afraid of work." And I don't think that I have ever been afraid of work. So, here are some conclusions, young man. Hug your mom every day because she needs it. That's the first step in learning to practice the gospel of our Savior Jesus Christ. Tell her in different ways that you love her and appreciate her. Remember, variety is the spice of life. Learn to share, because that's the first step in the area of communication. Sharing your life with others. Make your family a mutual admiration society. I want you to be the greatest teachers in the world, because that's what it takes to be great husbands and great fathers when it's your turn. Mother's Day is every day, not just once a year. Love, Brother Dave Latimer. Well, Brother Ken, I hope that that is my heritage that I would like to promulgate and spread, and it's no different. It's just putting into practice the gospel of our Savior Jesus Christ. And I thank you for this opportunity, and I hope it is a heritage for my grandkids.
Well, you're quite welcome, Dave, and thank you for sharing that with us. Before we finish, however, I'd like to learn a little more about your own personal life and what you've done in your life. Let's start for a moment and find out a little about when you were young, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Okay, I can distinctly remember going to my grandmother's farm every summer. In those days, I didn't know that it was just one way of Mom and Dad getting a babysitter for us. But my sisters and I always went to the farm during the summer and spent the summer there on the farm. And it was a lot of hard work, but it was fun.
Where was the farm?
The farm was in Bluffdale, Utah. In fact, if you go down from Salt Lake to Provo and look across the Jordan River, you can see my grandmother's farm right at the base of a knoll, a very distinct knoll. It's a mound of dirt. How it ever got there, I have no idea. But on each end, like a dumbbell, there it was, and it was on her property. And we had great times on that farm. Swimming in the canal and having snakes chase us, catching weasels and squirrels. And, well, one time on the farm, I think that I learned to be a little more human. There was a bird on the Jordan River, and my cousin and I would sail rocks just to see if we could hit that bird. And maybe we spent a half an hour sailing these rocks and bouncing them and missing the bird. But one time, one of my rocks hit the bird right in the neck and killed it. And that was really a shock to me. And I think that was a moment in my life where I wouldn't be so teenage vicious or whatever that is. So I can remember coming home from one of those trips to the farm and saying, Mom and Dad, I want to be a farmer. And then an airplane went over and I said, Mom and Dad, I think I want to be a pilot. And it turned out that I've come pretty close to both of those. I had no other aspirations except for the fact that through my scouting career, I wanted to be a forest ranger. And I took forestry graduated in wildlife management at Utah State Agricultural College and enjoyed that greatly. But I never had a chance to really get into it because of the war and going into the Air Force. So being in the Air Force was another one of those things that happened. I wanted to be a pilot, and it turned out that I did. I became a pilot. In fact, I was an instructor pilot for 4 years, stationed within the United States, and it was a great experience. In fact, looking back, I had too good of an experience. While others were out fighting the war, I was training him to fight. So mine was really a vacation rather than a soldier. But the fact that I could fly an airplane was very important to me. My friend across the street and I went in together, and he failed to become a pilot, and it really broke his heart. I had no idea that it was so important to him and his soul to be able to be a pilot. And so he became a navigator, but he failed to be a pilot. And sad to say, he crashed off of Florida. But the accomplishment of being a pilot was good for my soul and my ego. It was
Where did you fly?
mainly at Dodge City, Kansas. After graduating and receiving my wings, we moved into B-26 Transition. That's a medium-sized bomber made by Martin. It was not supposed to fly. The wings were so short. In fact, they had to enlarge the wings an extra 3 feet because sometimes it didn't get off the ground whenever it was loaded with bombardment. But mine was a light aircraft Transition. It was stripped down model, so it was very easy. It was not heavy, very easy to fly, and so it was much safer. But it turned out that when my class went through, they needed 3 instructor pilots, and so 3 of us were chosen from my class and kept on as instructor pilots. But it was a wonderful experience, and I have great memories for it. Some dangers. It was danger. It always happened to the other guy. The crash always happened to the other guy. You had to live it that way. And so, even though, well, one experience. I'll give you one close to death experience. In Dodge City, why the fog rolls in thick, maybe 100 feet thick, right on the ground, and so you can't land under it. And we were out flying around, and they could see that the fog was moving in, so they said, all airplanes come to home base. So we were following each other in and coming into the approach. Well, because it was a different situation, all my faculties were not there. And on the downwind, well, let's see, it's getting kind of vague. Maybe on the crosswind, you lower your landing gear and check it. And milk down your flaps for landing, just to make it a softer landing. And you check all this. But because we were coming in so quick, the airplane in front of me was not clearing the runway. And so we had to make up a go-around procedure. Well, in the downwind leg, you advance your throttles for takeoff position. And that's where I failed to do. So we were going on the whole approach with cruise RPM on the propellers. And that means it's a bigger bite, and it's not a takeoff position. In takeoff, it's like in low gear. You have a smaller bite and your RPM is revved up. Well, when we had to go around because of the airplane that was on the ground and was not clearing fast enough, I jerked up the wheel, jerked up the flaps, and advanced the throttle. Well, those were some of the procedures that you don't do. You get your wheels up, but you milk up the flaps a little at a time and advance the throttles for takeoff procedure. Well, here I was, hanging on my props, going across the field, and somebody observed it and said, boy, it sounded like a ghost. normally on takeoff where you hear a high-pitched sound, really a good whine. But it was just like a ghost floating across there. And we were close to stalling. We were within a mile or two of airspeed of stalling that aircraft before my student noticed that we didn't have RPM, and we advanced the RPM and climbed out. Well, it's little things like that it always happens to the other guy, but sometimes you can be. I had several incidents that were close, but I lived through it.
What units did you serve with? What units did you serve with?
Oh boy, I have a dictionary that shows me a whole list of them, but it's too big in my mind of which training squadron it was. We moved from Dodge City to Fredericks and Fredericks to Enid, and then from Enid to overseas. But overseas, I can remember that distinctly as the 64th Fighter Wing that I was stationed there. And I was flight commander of a communications unit. And this was based in Germany. Bad Kissingen, Germany is where we actually lived. And we would fly mainly out of Schweinfurt.
So this was after the war?
After the war, during the occupation. And my wife was with me for a whole year over there, so it was another vacation.
What year did you get married? What was your wedding date?
I know that one. March 21, 1944. I can remember that distinctly. I graduated from cadets in 1943 and became an instructor pilot before I asked my wife May Anderson from Logan, Utah, to marry me. And well, that's another story. I moved her out to Dodge City, Kansas when she was living in San Francisco. So all of my married life, until we got to this area, all I heard was San Francisco. That was the biggest competitor that I had. So we finally moved here, and we're happy we did.
Tell me about your children.
Oh, my two darling daughters? Oh, yeah. Well, they they are the light of my life, of course. Linda, my number one daughter. In fact, it was because Linda was about to be born that we came back from overseas, and Linda was born in Logan, Utah. I don't know whether we can actually get a good picture of Linda when she was married, and Linda when she was a tiny little girl learning to dress herself.
When was she born?
Let's see, Christmas Day, 1948. I'm lucky I know these anniversaries, but Christmas Day, of course, she's our Christmas baby. Nancy then is our charming blonde girl, and here she is with our pet dog, and she's a photographic model for me, which I enjoy doing. And there she is when she was in the middle of a cupcake or cake dough. But my wife has treasured those pictures, and they are a heritage for us. Linda has two children, Nathan and Amanda, and of course they're the lights of our eyes too, and I'm hoping that someday Nathan and Amanda will be viewing this very tape because, well, I think it'll be a nice heritage for them, just to get an idea of what their old granddad was like.
Where do your children now live?
Well, fairly close. Linda and her family are at Antioch, and we get to see them practically once a month, and sometimes more often than that. In fact, there's a sewing circle where my wife and the nieces and Linda and her husband Roger come down and with the two grandkids, and happens once a month, the sewing circle, and they accomplish a little sewing in it. And Nancy, she lived in New York for some 10 years, I guess, but she's now back in Palo Alto. She's enjoying her job right on California Avenue and El Camino with a group of lawyers there. She's in the office work, and she has her own apartment and is decorating it right at the moment, and is right in the thrills of interior decoration. So in a sense, we are very lucky to have the kids so close so that we can see them often.
Dave, thank you very much. Before we leave, do you have anything you'd like to say in conclusion?
Yeah, let me give a Scoutmaster's minute. My testimony is that the gospel of Jesus Christ is the greatest story ever told. And for me, it's my salvation. Thank you, friends.